Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual session called Freestyling Feedback. My name is Neha Scher-Shah, and I am the chapter leader for Las Vegas chapter for Interaction Design Foundation. How many people are familiar with Interaction Design Foundation? Could you please drop an emoji in the chat if you are a member or if you've heard about IxDF? Okay, Brandon. Cool. Yeah, welcome. For those of you who might be new, Interaction Design Foundation is one of the world's largest UX learning communities. The foundation's goal is to create spaces like this, where we can learn from each other, share knowledge, and connect with peers across the globe. And so before we start the session, I always ask for everyone to drop in where they're attending from, where they're joining from. I'm in Seattle, and I'm sure there's a IXDF chapter near you. And if you don't have any, you can start one. You just have to be a member. Toronto, wow, yeah, awesome. I know that there's somebody who always joins us from Ecuador, and that's always very cool. So, we have hosted a range of sessions in the past, from workshops to fireside chats. And one of the things that we consistently hear from participants is how valuable it is to learn directly from practitioners who are shaping the work in our UX field. Today's session continues that spirit. So, the topic that we're exploring today is how do we ensure that we are incorporating the customer's perspective in an ever-changing environment? We've all been there. So, we'll have about an hour together, followed by an extended Q&A where you can ask more questions. So, I encourage you to stay engaged, share your thoughts in the chat, and make the most of the time we have with our expert today. Which brings me to our speaker, Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hi, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for so generously sharing your experience and knowledge here with the community. And Sam is a senior UXR at Rocket Mortgage. I'm eager to learn from her. So let's welcome Sam. And Sam, over to you.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so let me do the classic, making sure that my screen is shared before I start yammering. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be giving this talk on freestyling feedback. This talk is really primarily focused on kind of like what I do on, I would say, like the day-to-day basis right now. There's a lot of things that have evolved drastically within the UXR practice over the years. And I think some of the models that we or have been doing are getting a little bit outdated for the times that we are in right now. So really going to be focusing on, talking about like how are we making sure that we're maintaining this consumer perspective throughout the product development cycle. Um, with that said, you already know I'm Sam, and that I also work at Rocket. I pretty much have primarily worked in fintech, so finances, tech, and also a bit in the education space as well. I have a master's degree right now in HCI and design. And if you're curious, I am currently based in sunny California, which, oh my goodness, it is getting hotter and hotter here every year. So it's getting a little too hot right now. Um, Agenda. Okay, so we have so much to cover. I am going to be doing just a high level overview of what is freestyle feedback in the first place, and then going through these three core tenets. Basically, the thing to note about this is that we have a pretty wide audience here. So we probably have some researchers, but we also probably have some product managers, designers, engineers. And I'm sure we also probably have people coming in from, a very small startup space to, a well-staffed, huge corporation. my goal, if I play my cards right, is to give at least something for everybody. That being said, I will probably be talking in a very broad overview level. But however, I do have three different discussion sections at the end of each tenet. So we can either go through a discussion prompt, or if there's a lot of questions at that time where you're like, oh, I really wanted to dive deep into this specific area, or I have this type of question, we can use the time for that too. It's a very low key, relaxed session. So we'll go ahead and get started with freestyling feedback. Okay. So taking a step back, why does research basically get dropped off in the first place? Because the whole point of this conversation is making sure that we're incorporating research, but in order to know, like, okay, how do we incorporate it? We should also know why is it not getting incorporated in the first place. Um, these are some examples. Trust me, I'm sure there's plenty more, but these are kind of like some of the top reasons that I normally come across. One being you might have stakeholders that are just like already like, we know what's best. We know what the what our users want. You might have that situation. If you're working for a B2B company, you might also have a situation where it's like, well, we have a captive audience. Captive audience meaning that they have to use our tool, our service, our product, whatever. So why does it really matter if we're doing research on something where they're going to have to use it regardless? And then also we have the classic, like there's just not enough time. We have so much that we have to get done, but there's not enough time to collect user feedback. So for today's talk, I will be focusing, honing in on this concept of like there's no time. I will say that the final section, which focuses on that socialization piece, will kind of help with mitigating those other two concerns. But a lot of this talk is going to be focused on like how do we get research in a very fast-paced manner? Um, why do we not, why do we think we have no time to get feedback? This is something that I'm seeing quite a shift in the industry where a lot of people, obviously, we have AI advancements both for the products that we're giving, but also for pretty much like what tools we're using ourselves as researchers, product managers, designers. Because of that, there's a lot of flexing business needs. You've all heard of a pivot. Pivots happen consistently across the board. Um, and because we have these AI advances, we have these new tools now, the expectations to be doing research, to be doing product design, product management, it's only going to get faster and faster. And I have firsthand experienced it with it. I am currently hired on as what they call a rapid researcher at Rocket right now. So I really got brought into doing research quickly because I came from a startup experience. Now, I will say when I thought of rapid, I was not thinking of it at the speed in which they were thinking of it. I used to be doing research between the time frame of like 2 to 4 weeks, and now I'm doing research in under 1 week, sometimes same day. I get the request in the morning, I'm giving the results back at the end of the day, which past me would be like, that's insane. That's not possible. I don't know what you're talking about. Um, but that's why we're having this talk. It is actually possible. There are ways to set this up to where you can get research done at a relatively fast time. Um, so the whole point is really trying to highlight like how are we going to ensure that our end users are not getting left behind when we're trying to move at this rapid pace to hitting these business needs. Um, I will also say too that it's something where if you're all in this talk, I expect it's a bit of preaching to the choir, but it's like at the end of the day, you don't want to make a product that users don't like, right? That's the importance of having feedback. It's because it helps with de-risking. So that's why we're going to be talking about freestyle feedback. So, what is it? Basically, freestyle feedback, the way I describe it, is that it's this really flexible approach or kind of like mindset, I would say, that I go into a lot of my projects with right now, in terms of how do I get to this end state in mind while also, doing whatever it takes, basically. Very similar to swimming freestyle. So if you don't know what it means to swim freestyle, it's basically when swimmers go into the pool. They're competing to see who can get to the end at the fastest, regardless of like what type of stroke or like how they go about swimming. This is very much the same way. And in order to freestyle, there's basically three core principles that really guide a lot of the work that I'm doing right now. The first one is making sure there are systems established, which I know sounds like the exact opposite of freestyling, but we'll get into it. Um, the second part is also making sure that you keep it really, really lean and crisp. And then the third final piece is making sure how do you showcase the value of your work, which is all about socialization. Um, for this first portion, we're going to be talking about establishing systems. So think of going along with that metaphor, right? When we're thinking of freestyling, you kind of have to think of it as like those lane dividers that are in the pool, right? It's like at the end of the day, I could tell you, like, do whatever it takes to get your research done. However, if you don't have certain things that kind of help you as these guardrails to point you in the right direction, you can kind of rift off into like the deep end. So how do you actually, so it's like, okay, what systems do I actually need in order to be able to do this type of freestyling? Um, and there's two parts. There's going to be how am I recruiting and also what templates am I using or at what stages should I be using templates? Now, again, this first portion on recruitment is really particular to places that may not have any recruitment set up because it's important. If I do this talk and I say don't worry about recruitment at the end, trust me, it will be a disaster. I've been there, I've done it. So we're going to talk about that first. So how do you go about like kind of like gathering people here? Basically, there's two different styles. The first style is the more long-term panel. So this is like a very classic standard research approach. This is usually an ongoing panel that you can consistently tap into pretty much year-round as long as you want. Now, the way you go about getting this panel, it's going to be usually one of two ways. The first is through your research tool, if you have a research tool, if your company can fund that. That might be like a D Scout or user testing. They have a built-in panel to their team, so you're able to use them to tap into. The second is if you're working in a place where it's like we have a really niche audience, so a panel is probably not going to be available. That is when you have to do a little bit of that work of getting maybe an email list of people that have opted into doing research and having that as your standard list set. Um, that's normal. This is like kind of what the average, I say, research team is probably tapping into. Um, the other form, though, that I tend to use more frequently is what I call like a micro community. So, a micro community in particular is basically think of it like for the researchers in the room, you can think of it like a diary study, except just ask whatever. But for in the non-research terminology, it's basically like get people together for a very short, or I shouldn't say very short, for a period of time, letting them know the end date and saying that, hey, we're going to tap into you for research. So this could be, for example, I've worked on a lot of sprinting projects at Rocket, and we'll have a 6 week sprint, right? Where we're like, hey, we're going to develop this whole product, right? And we have product managers in it, we have designers in it, and we know that we're going to be iterating on this idea. If that's the case, and I know, hey, this is going to be probably a 6 week period, we're time boxing it. This is the perfect time to create this little micro mini community where it's like, hey, we're requesting you to do research with us where we're going to tap you in at these random times. It might be an interview, it might be like a quick 1 to 2 question poll, it might be seeing some prototypes, like all these different things, but we know that we have this group kind of on lock and key, which is nice. Um, as you can imagine, there's always pros and cons when it comes to having these types of systems. So I always like to let people know if you're doing a long-term panel, it's great. They're already onboarded. Yay. So you don't have to do any type of paperwork again. If it's NDAs or things you have to have set up, you don't have to do it twice. It's already done. And they're also usually familiar with the research process. And when I say that, I mean that people, especially people that are using research that are from a research tool, they're usually very good at kind of vocalizing their thoughts. They're used to that type of manner. So if you're using a long-term panel, these are people that are probably constantly used to like speaking up and talking out loud about their thoughts, which is great. The major con, though, if you don't have, let's say, a research person, is that you do have to keep them engaged, right? So at the end of the day, you do have to send out like a monthly check-in, right? That might be just a three-question poll of like, just fun questions. But if you want to make sure that you're keeping these people notified, engaged, or else then when you do need them, when it does matter, they might fall off completely and you're just hearing crickets. So that's I would say the major con is just kind of the maintenance of it. Versus with the micro community, you don't really have to worry about that maintenance. You have them engaged for 6 because they have already said, "Oh, I'm on board. I'm here for like whatever this period of time you have listed me for." Um, and usually you can get really, really specific with your recruitment requirements. So if you're someone that's like, hey, we know for this project we need this attribute, this attribute, this attribute, we need this person to do like 5 different backflips. Like you can ask all that in the upfront, and then you don't have to worry about it when you're freestyling along the way. You're like, I already have my target user for this whole period of time. So it's nice that you can get really tight and really niche on the recruitment in the very beginning. And as I said, you don't have to worry about keeping them engaged. The major con, which is the reverse of the long-term panel, is that you do have to repeat the setup process again. So once that sprint is over, or once you're done with that project, you will have to go about trying to re-recruit new people for your next project. So things just to keep in mind there. Um, Templates. The other piece of this establishing systems is thinking about how do we optimize the process? Because trust me, when you're running fast and you're trying to get data to inform your decision or to inform your partner's decision, you're going to need to have something that will make it go quick. As much as we don't like to think of that setup, it does need to have something so that way you can just keep going, going, going. For places, again, talking a little bit about if you don't have things established, the things to kind of keep in mind across the process might be, one, do you have like a go-to question bank? This is like the fun Mad Libs, right? Like, what are your first impressions of blank? Like, do users like, are you interested in blank? Like these types of things where most likely you're going to be asking those questions again and again. Just have them saved somewhere. Just have them kind of like in a little storage in the back end. So that way you can easily just keep pulling them out and reusing, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Trust me, reinventing the wheel is the hardest part. In doing research studies, it's trying to start fresh. Don't do that. Don't torture yourself. Just copy and paste. The second thing is NDAs. If you're a company, I've worked mostly in fintech, so we're very strict on NDA processes. If you're a place that needs NDAs, like having that set up as like your main, this is your template NDA that you always use for your studies moving ahead. Trust me, will make your life go so much easier, so much faster. Another thing that I think people often forget or don't think about if they're really in the weeds with research is also participant like comms. So this is really the things where it's like, welcome to the study, right? Like that intro email, or it's like, hey, thanks for doing this study. Here's your incentive. Or like, hey, here's the customer support line if you need it, if they're asking for like some help with their account. These are things that if you have it already stored and you can kind of, again, just use that template, it saves you the brain space to be able to focus in more on the nitty gritty parts of doing the research. And then the last, if you are a researcher, having kind of like whatever's your go-to for your share out, whether that's like a doc or a presentation or a Slack post, those types of things, which we'll get more in depth with on that socialization piece. But those are kind of the things that I would also be considering. And last but certainly not least, if you are setting the system up for your freestyling feedback, in which I recommend looping in compliance, PR. If you're a non-researcher working closely with the researcher, getting their approval. But this is the approval stage because basically, when you set this up once and you run through and get their approval from the people you need to get approval on, trust me, you don't have to do it again. It's done. It's like you are literally set to be freestyling for as long as you want. So yes, it does have a little bit of work in that first stage, but then you can start to really get clever with being able to evolve it to your needs without feeling like, okay, I have to keep checking for every single project I'm doing that has to run through these same people. Um, since this is such a long talk and I want to make sure that we cover everything, I will say that there's two parts to this. Template resources, these are kind of my top ones. I know that they're going to be dropped in the chat below, but I usually generally go to either user interviews. People Nerds is run by Dscout. They have like a lot of great like inspiration sources for conducting research. And then also Maze has a pre-built question bank. And I will say, I will start and say that this question bank is long. It has like 300. You do not need to have a 300 like word question bank built out. Honestly, I get away with probably 20 questions that I have, not like the 20 question game, but I have a literal 20 questions that I will commonly kind of copy paste and rechange from. So it does not have to be a massive thing, but having something small to start with is really helpful. Um, that being said, I've talked a lot about copy and pasting. But there is like obviously there's always going to be some cons with using templates. Nielsen Norman Group had this really great article called The Template Trap, where it's basically talking about how to kind of use these templates like correctly. So you aren't just copy and pasting, but you're also thinking about how to adapt it best to your needs. So again, highly recommend if you have time, like taking a look at that article because I do think it's a really good summary of like kind of how to actually not just use templates, but use them well. Um, we'll pause here. This was the first portion. Are there any questions? I also can't see the chat, or at least I'm one of those people that are Gen Z slash boomers that don't know how to see the chat yet in Zoom.
Well, if I can figure out my camera. So somebody asked, where did you get your degree in HCI?
Oh, that's a great question. I got it from the University of California, Irvine. Yeah, not too much to say on that, but it was an online program, so was able to do that while working full time. So that was a whole other experience. But if you ever want to dive into further things on the master's degree, always happy to.
That's cool. I went to Parsons, and at that time,
Mm.
um, it was not called UX, it was called Design and Technology. So I did my master's in
Mm.
Design and Technology,
Okay.
and it turned into UX and so much more. Um, Also, how much do you pay people to do backflips?
I wish we paid people to do backflips. That would be fun. I don't know how that would work well in the interview process. They would have to have a pretty elaborate setup to make sure that I can confirm that they're doing it. But I would hope we would pay them well if we were to do that.
I hope so too. Rebecca is asking, how do you find the panel?
Oh, that's a good question. As I said before, it's kind of two parts. So if your company has access to a research tool, then that research tool sometimes they're already built in. They have a panel that you can just directly use because they're like, hey, for example, with Dscout, they're like, you can tap into our panel, so you can do like a recruitment, which would have like a screener, and you can basically trial out to say like, okay, I want these people, and these people and then they're already in the system. So then they go and take your study. If it's not that, and you have a place where it's like, oh, I don't have access to a research tool that has a panel, that's a bit more of like the grassroots approach. So a lot of that is more so like if you have people using the product, right? Like, can you get the email addresses and ask if they'd be interested in taking like doing like further research and being a part of a panel. There's a lot of branding that goes into that too, I will say, because we had to do that a lot at Acorns. We had like Acorns ambassadors, and it's like a whole exciting thing to be a part of. So we can always get deeper into that, but yeah, it's usually trying to find people that you are already using it. If it's really, really grassroots, you might be looking at like online communities that would be interested in doing things. A lot of times I know researchers that will tap straight into Reddit to be like, okay, are there people here that might be interested in joining a research panel with the incentive? So yeah, definitely an extreme between like what's super easy versus like what's hard. It's just dependent on how much is your organization usually willing to provide like compensation and things like that to get the panel. That's a great question.
By the way, if anybody has a question, feel free to come off mute and talk to Sam directly. This is a really informal environment, so
Yeah, I promise I don't bite. Like I'm probably going to be the least intimidating person you'll ever talk to. So, definitely don't hesitate to, if you ever have a question, you can also interrupt me at a point in time. Um,
I have a
so
question.
Kevin,
Perkins. Oh, sorry.
go
I
ahead, go
didn't see
ahead.
the raise hand feature. I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it. So I had a question. What percentage
yeah.
follow do you see from those who say that they're going to commit for the, say, 6 or 8 weeks versus those who actually complete it?
Oh, that's such a great question. So when I did the 6 week panel, it was actually kind of crazy because I think we had like probably 70 to 80% that like finally finished and completed. Like we really didn't have the drop off. And that's coming from a panel of like, I want to say it was like 75 people that we did for our study. So we had like that 6 week sprint, 75 people going through. But yeah, it was impressive. And then what we did at the end is that we actually asked people like, would you be willing to do something like this again? And we had 98% of people say like, yeah, I'd be totally interested in doing something like this. So really, really cool to see. I think you get more engage, but it's really about how do you keep them engaged. I know I mentioned that the long-term panel, you kind of have to keep the engagement up. I think for the project that I've been working on too, like the most recent one I'm thinking of, it's like I still try to send like a weekly update of like, hey, here's like might be some questions that are coming down the line, and having a bit more of that close connection with the actual customers that we're testing with. I think that also really helped with making sure that we keep them engaged enough for that long period of time.
Yep. And are you, when you're figuring out how many people to invite for it, are you rolling in that attrition that, okay, I want 50 responses, so I'm going to recruit
Yes.
65 because I know there's going to be that fall off. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Usually when it comes to it, I try to do like it also really does depend on the target audience, I would say. Like if you know you have a pretty general population, I think it's a little bit easier to be like, oh, like, I can always re-recruit some extra people and pull them in when I need to. However, if you know that you have an audience that might be like it might be like business people, so it might be more like B2B type of things where time is money, and they might already have a lot of other obligations outside of it. That is when I try to make sure I'm like, okay, I will get as many people as I possibly can because I know this is a population that may taper off because they have other things going on and they might just not be the type that's really interested in doing this type of stuff. So those are the things. It does vary, unfortunately, based off the
Yeah.
places. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
So we do have three questions. Um,
Okay.
do you want to address them now or Q&A?
That is a good question. Okay, well, it depends on how fast. Let's answer at least once more and we'll see how long I yap for. And if I yap for too long, then I'll take it at Q&A.
Okay, so Kevin is asking for participants that know the process well, do you think it may cause some biases to your research?
Yes, that's a good question. So definitely that can always be a possibility, right? It's like if you're recruiting, usually you don't want to recruit the same people. This is why I said for like a micro community, you're usually kind of doing okay because these people are not like that you're going to be talking to these people for a period of time. But it's treated a bit more like in research, we call this like a diary study, which is just like a long-term period study. Usually that's fine. However, if you're using a panel that's more like a long-term panel, but you see only the same 5 to 6 faces coming into your studies each time, that's when I'm like, okay, you probably want to go and make sure that you're getting a wider perspective. If they're used to doing research, I don't always see that as a bad thing. Again, obviously there's probably extreme cases. It's more so the worry I have is I'm hearing the same voices all the time. That's when I get more concerned where I'm like, okay, like I need to have more diversity in my sample. But if these people are like, they're a diverse sample, they, come from different backgrounds, doing different things, but they're kind of familiar with the research. I'm Again, there are probably very specific nuances, but there's definitely times where I'm like, that's okay. There's usually other things that are a bit more pressing that I'm more focused on in recruitment. Okay, let's try one more.
Okay. So I don't know how to say your name. I don't know if you want to come off mute. I know your vi video is on. Is it Anu? Yeah. So go ahead. You want to ask your question?
Oh yeah, thanks. So I was actually for someone trying to transition into UX research. I was asking if it's better to go the master's route or to
Mm,
join, say, like a membership like in the IDX IXDF. I was trying to figure it out and how to just build like hands-on, get some project and build like an hands-on portfolio. I really don't know. So just wanted to confirm
yeah.
what part you recommend.
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, the classic research answer is it depends, right? I would say, like for me at least, when I think about these things, it's kind of like what's your level of time commitment, right? That's a big part of it. There's also the part too of like, I think a master's degree, as someone with it, as someone who's gone through a program like it, I think assuming that the master's degree will get the like, oh, this is going to be everything that you need for the job. I usually say that like the job is like getting the real hands-on experience is the thing that's going to get you more value. Now obviously it's like the classic chicken and egg, well, how do I get experience to apply, right, and get a job? That it just doesn't make sense, which I hate that our system's like that. But a lot of times I do recommend to mentees like doing volunteer UX programs because there are a lot of those where it's like you can volunteer with like a short team and that gets you, I really think that gets you more of the, hey, you're working with a nonprofit, they have these UX problems, you create the portfolio while you're learning the skills on the job, and that makes it a bit easier to translate versus sometimes with like a master's program, you can get really in the weeds with like the academia stuff that it might not always be as practical when you get there. That's my take on it. But again, that's a very high level brushstroke. Obviously, there's a lot of different factors, and we can always think of on LinkedIn afterwards too if you have more questions, and we can go in much deeper.
Yeah, I'd like to add my 2 cents because, like Sam said, there is no one path. I think this is also a larger conversation based on where you are, what your background is, what you need to learn. Both Sam and I provide mentorship on ADP List, so you can sync up with us on LinkedIn, find us on ADP List, and talk to us more about it. With the IXDF education, I will say that it is the most accessible education in UX at the moment. Many of the programs have so much jargon in them that it's really hard to even understand what the concept really is. And in my experience, that education with IXDF gave me pretty easy and quick understanding of what I was doing. So plus, there's the community side of it, networking, because most of the jobs are found through
Yeah.
networking. So there's definitely value in IXDF, which is why I'm here and I'm doing all of this so that because IXDF empowers me to bring this education to everybody who is out there. So that tells you a little bit about that organization, right? Yeah, but anyway, coming back to the topic, let's
Yes.
proceed.
Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. So I will go ahead. I'll skip the discussion prompt, and we'll go into the second portion, which is keeping it lean. So this is really the meat and, well, I'll say the socialization maybe is more so the meat and potatoes, but this is really important in terms of being able to do research really quickly. Um, Two parts. All these sections are split into two parts. Don't ask me why, but it just happened that way. I'll be talking first about how to leverage past studies, and then also talking about obviously okay, how do you kind of get the research done fast? Um, Past studies, right? What's the best way in making sure that you're pulling prior research? And this is really the point where you want to make sure you're starting with your why question. I often find that it happens across, it's not like, oh, only researchers do this, only product managers do this. This happens across the board where we're all come together and we're just like, yeah, that'd be a great research project. And then we start running with it. And it's like, hold on, we don't know why we're doing this. It happens more often than you think. And it's not something where it's like, oh, like, we have a key business question, like, so we should know it. But like, really, really, like, what are you trying to solve here? Sometimes it doesn't even need research. Sometimes it's a data analytics question and not a research question. So making sure that you're crisp on like, this is the core topic, right? This is the design that we're trying to figure out. This is the PRD plan that we have figured out before you're starting to just jump into being like, let's do things really rapid. Um, Once you know, hey, we have a core issue, we need to speak to users, right? Um, this is where we start getting into leveraging the past research, which is not the flashy version. Usually, the flashy version is using all the fun methodologies, and that's what people get really into. But it's really important to have kind of like this core user truth file, I would say. This can include a lot of different information. Sometimes it's like segmentation data or persona data, if you have that. Sometimes it's through data analytics. It's all the stuff that's going to inform what do you actually really need to know from a research perspective. Um, and what's nice is that if you start with your why at the very beginning and we're like, hey, this is the main thing that we're trying to tackle here, it will also, I promise you, it will help you with avoiding making a lengthy literature review because nobody wants that. Trust me, nobody wants to read like a 10-page essay of all the different types of reports that are out there. If you get really crisp on like what you're doing, you will also make sure that you get the lit review done in a way that's really fast. That being said, how do you go about the lit review process? Well, this is where I usually tap into AI because this is the part that I'm the most lazy at, is trying to go back and hunt for everything. Usually, I try to use this both for creating summaries that are in-house, which is like within the company that I'm working at, and also gathering research out on the web. You would be surprised that a lot of times there's questions that come in from stakeholders or people that are like, oh, like I don't know how we should like create this thing. And it's like, well, do we have any like internal research on it? I'm like, no, but like, there's studies that show this outside on the web if we do a quick Google search. But people don't usually think that. If you have a researcher, you have a research like department or area, they're just like, we use only this research. So trying to make sure that you kind of get a blend of sources is really helpful and it alleviates a lot of what are the questions you actually have to ask. Um, Obviously, with AI, as everyone probably knows here, it's just making sure that you kind of use these links and kind of use that as a fact checker, right? You want to make sure that the AI is pulling from something that is traceable, right? That you can go back to the source and make sure is that correct. Um, with regards to where you house this lit review, which again, I'm not talking a large lit review, I'm talking a very small like information on these past studies. Usually you can either have in like a Word doc is a very classic or Google Doc, however you prefer it. Sometimes if you have like certain tools, like Slack is very common, so you might use it on the canvas of the team page that you're using for this project. Just create a section in there that's like lit review. Here's all that we already know. The other way that you can do it is you can actually use AI again. So the AI that you have been using to collect information, right? If you put all of those sources into that AI, you can actually have it basically be your assistant that knows all this information. So you just ask it like, hey, what do we know about this? And then it will pull from the sources that you've already housed. So it's kind of nice. It's like acting two in one. It can both search for things, but it can also store it as well. So that way you can pull from it when you need it most. Um, Second piece, which is more so focusing on the researching aspect. So how do we actually do this rapidly? Again, as I said, like I had to go from 2 to 4 weeks to getting it done in like 24 hours. The way that I go about most of my research is really thinking about it through the lens of like micro insights. So I don't usually do as many foundational big reports anymore. I really focus on like what is the smallest things that I can kind of get answers on that are also top priority. So the way I like to think is I'm always addressing what are the key 1 to 2 questions that are needed in this exact moment right now. We are not creating a list of 10 different wants. That's lovely. We can take the 8 of them and put it in a save for later. This is out of scope for right now. I think people oftentimes feel they need to know everything, but by trying to know everything in like a standard research report setting, you oftentimes are missing out for the information that is really the most crucial at that time. It's better to split it up as opposed to having it condensed all in a long report that people may not even read. And what's great about this is that if you've done your lit review, you already have you have most of the information you probably need. You're only really looking to fill in just what are the gaps that, we haven't done previous research on, and we can't really tell from the web. So this is really the crucial point of being like, okay, I know my why. I have a lit review that covers everything. I can just ask in my AI bot, like, hey, what do we know about this, this, and this? But if it can't return something, this is the time where it's like, okay, we're going to focus in on just these key questions here. Um, and the other most crucial part of this is making sure that you have some type of analysis plan. Now, if you're a person who isn't a researcher or is a person that, work like you're either work closely with a researcher or you might do research, but it's not like your full-time gig, that's totally okay. This is still something that I think is helpful to know because it will make the research process, so like you getting that feedback so much faster. It's really about thinking of like what's the most efficient method. So for research, you really want to think about like, is this a closed-ended versus open-ended question? If you don't know what that is, just in case, I kind of have the example over here on the side where an open-ended would be something that's like, what tools do you use to search for recommendations versus you kind of ask that same style question, but you add in like multiple choice options. This is really important. This is super important because when you're going and you get this information fast, you don't have to code in all of these open-ended responses or use AI to code it, but then have to fact check it. You can just literally be like, okay, 20% of people said that they're using Reddit because this is what's been checked 20% of the time. So just thinking about like if you have the categories or ideas in mind of what these categories of potential answers could be, let your researcher know. They will appreciate it, trust me, to be able to kind of make this type of analysis much faster. If you have to use open-ended questions or do like a video recorded response, usually you can use AI to kind of jumpstart that analysis. So they'll start to like record, go through the transcripts, you kind of feed it in one at a time, and it can get that data for you. However, again, I always recommend fact checking it afterwards. And then the other piece is if you're working with a research tool, I always recommend capping the amount of time that you will be letting the participant speak for. Trust me, the difference between watching a 2-minute video versus a 5 to 10 minute video, it is night and day when it comes to working super fast. So keep it short, keep it snappy. Um, that is that second portion here. I'll pause again to see if there was any questions that came up in the chat that I also can't see. So
Yeah, I think Dia has, sorry if I'm not saying your name right, but Go ahead, ask your question.
Hi, I just wanted to know if you know if any great AI tools for UX.
Ooh, that is always that's the big ticket question right now. There's a lot. I really feel like my current team right now, we're doing a lot of experimentation with what's called like AI moderation. So there's this cool funky tool called Outset AI that lets you basically have like an AI bot that will be the moderator of an interview, but like the participant will speak back to it. So that's really fun and funky on the most extreme end. But I really do think like for research right now, we do a lot of things that are either A, it's like built into the research tools we're using. So if it's like Scout that has AI built into it, user testing has AI built into it for the analysis portions where it'll give us a quick summary that you can give your stakeholders if they need something a bit more urgent. There's also tools like Condense, which is a great tool for doing analysis in, but it also acts as a repository. So it holds all the research studies and uses AI to basically be like, hey, like, have we done research on this? And then it pulls it back. I really think like just knowing the basics of AI prompting will get you far. It will get you pretty far. There's also agentic AI. That's a whole other thing that I'm not even gonna go in there. But basically, if you can get good with prompting, especially if you're like someone that's trying to just get into the field, so knowing how to prompt with ChatGPT, already a huge win. Um, my brain's like trying to rattle off the list of like all the random AI tools. But yeah, I don't again, I don't think it's so much of like there's this one tool that all researchers are using outside of ChatGPT. But it's more so like, can you know how to prompt effectively to get what you need out of it? And if you can, then regardless of what company you get into that's using whatever tool, you're going to be much better off than most people will be. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions?
Nope, I think right now we're good.
Okay, cool. So we'll go ahead and we'll get to the last portion here, which is on the socialization piece. Um, this is the question I get asked quite frequently from people because usually it comes in two different flavors. It's usually asked of like, Sam, how do I get my stakeholders bought into research because they just don't really see the value in it? Or vice versa, it might be towards the end where it's like, okay, how do I make sure that my work is impactful, right? Like, how am I making sure that people see the value in what I do? So it's really that focus of like, what do I do to get their buy-in at the start of the process, and then how do I make sure that value is shown at the end? Now, obviously, there's a whole middle portion of like keeping stakeholders engaged in that fuzzy middle section of research that I won't cover for right now. We can always cover that in Q&A. But kind of focusing on these two key portions. Focusing on starting. When it comes to how do we go about informing people, I like to think that there's three different types. There is this first type that's like the classic kickoff call. This is the legendary thing that they teach you. It's like get all your stakeholders in a room and start talking it out. This in particular is good having that early alignment when you're thinking about incorporating freestyle feedback. The reason why, similar to as I mentioned with like the templates and getting that stuff approved early on, is that if you get these things approved at the very beginning of your stage, then you don't have to keep going back for reapproval. You just get it once and then you're like good to go. So usually like if it's a sprint environment, I might be asking like, okay, what sample size are we okay with here? Or like what's the audience that we're okay with testing here for a long period for a period of time, right? What's the cadence in which we're kind of planning to do like these quick one hit like research questions? And then also which I think is very common, or I shouldn't say very common, but I've noticed kind of like this shift happening is like when, if slash when to do reviews. When I say that, I mean in the lens of like if you're someone that needs to get if you're someone that's working very fast, very iterative, the one thing that can hold you up is waiting for other people to take a look at your work and be like, yep, that's good. You got the green light, get going. That can really slow the process down if they are not responding back in a very fast manner. So, what I like to do is sometimes with that question bank that I mentioned before, is I will show kind of like a list of example questions to the stakeholders and be like, hey, these are the questions that I'm probably going to be asking on a recurring basis. Are we good with these? Because if we're good with these now, I'm going to be taking it and running with it for a period of time. And I won't be asking every time I launch a test, like, is this good? Because you've already given that approval in the upfront. So those are the things I really try to align with people on early. So that way, when you're moving fast, you don't have to feel like, oh, do I need someone to look at this? It's like you've already had people look at it, which is great. Um, that's the first way of getting people bought into this idea of kind of freestyling. Um, the second way is like I would say the middle ground is kind of like the on the radar. So you might be in a company that is meeting heavy and time is precious and nobody has time in their calendars to like come together for this type of conversation. That's becoming more common. For that case, I generally speaking like to do a more like offline approach. So wherever your main company's communications are in, whether that's through Slack, Teams, email, whatever, I will kind of send out an email or like a message to those people that I know I need to get buy-in from to just be like, hey, FYI, I'm thinking about running this type of like quick iterative rounds of research. Here's like a quick document that kind of highlights at a high level like what these requirements were from the previous things, right? Like what are the sample sizes, like how often I'm planning to do it. Here's like some of the questions, I'm just putting this on your radar. Um, so that way it's aware. And then if they're like, okay, cool, like I've got it, you don't have to have a whole kickoff call. You can literally just do that and you're like good to go. Because sometimes again, it takes forever to just get people to look at things. But if you just send it through wherever most people are communicating, you're going to get the approval a lot faster. Again, not in every situation, but sometimes that's also an option. And then I would say for the other far end extreme, it's more so about you can also do like this proof of concept. So sometimes there are going to be people that will just not see the vision. And that's okay. Sometimes it's hard for them to kind of see where you're coming from. And if that's the case, what I like to do in certain situations is I'll do like a small test run of showcasing like this is the value or in terms of what I could do if I had this type of freestyling feedback system. So I'll take a small project. It will be low cost. That's the key thing, right? It's not going to be something that's like a high cost, like a huge budget. Like it will be very low cost, very simplistic, but I'm showcasing like, hey, if I was a designer, right? It's like I was able to, run this quick study, get some feedback, and I was able to iterate and do this with it, right? And showcasing kind of that value of like, this is what the feedback will get us if we keep going down this route, right? Or if we have more budget, we can do even more with it. Sometimes it's about literally showing them, kind of doing a pilot test of it first, and then getting their feedback in. Now, of course, this is probably like what I would say the most risky of the three. So it is a thing of in terms of like using your best judgment. But the main point of this being is that I think a lot of people kind of assume that the kickoff call is the only way to get research going. And if you don't have this magical call with every star aligned, that it's not going to happen. When there really are a lot of different ways of keeping people informed about your work. So again, it's definitely situation specific, but I just want people to know like you do have options. It's not always just a standard thing that is being taught. It's like there are different ways to go about keeping people informed of your work. Now, we're at the last part, right? So this is after doing it all, right? You've gone through, you did your freestyling, you've had your system set up, you've started the project, right? You're all through, and now it's like, okay, what is the way in which I need to kind of share out this work? Um, and that being said, deliverables are key. I'm a big deliverable girly. Like this is my backflipping that I do in my job is I do a lot of work when it comes to what type of deliverable I'm going to send out. And I flex like crazy. So this is where you really want to focus on kind of like socializing your results. If you're not a researcher, this is more so about like, how are you taking what has been done, right? Like what research has been done and tying it into your work. The biggest pain, or I shouldn't say pain point, the biggest I don't even want to say mistake because it's not always going to lead to a bad thing, but hurdle, I guess I'll leave it as that for now. That I kind of see people doing is that they don't meet stakeholders where they're at. So let's say you're working in a company and you're working for a place where it's like, hey, we're a heavy, PowerPoint culture. We do all PowerPoints, right? And then someone comes in and they're like, look at this flashy, like prototype or thing that I've done, or like look at it in like this Word document format. It's going to be so much harder to get people to meet you there. There are people I've worked with, like product managers, who will not look at anything outside of an Excel sheet. And what I will do in those cases is instead of creating a Word document, instead of creating like a PowerPoint that's flashy that we have to go and like do a whole talk through, I will just comment directly in their Excel sheet where they are at to be like, hey, we have an insight here that ties to this particular cell. We have an insight for this here that ties to this. And they're much more likely to acknowledge it and digest that information because you're meeting them in the space that they're constantly occupying. And this is something that also helps you with getting much more visibility, regardless of your job level. A lot of times people assume, like, well, no one's going to listen to me if I'm at like the very bottom of the totem pole. If you're at a company that's like that, like, there are other problems that we have to just like address first, but B, there's also a lot of companies where it's more so like the people that are, feeling like I don't get a lot of visibility. It's just because you're not in the areas that people are actually much more visible in. So thinking about like how do you kind of flex your results, or how do you flex your work into a way that is going with kind of the current of like how the corporation's working as opposed to against it. If it's like a mini deck, right? So it's not a 50-page deck, but it's like, hey, I have 3 slides in a Figma slide jam of like, this is like what I've learned, right? Quick and digestible. If it's a Slack canvas, right? People only are talking in Slack. It's like, do a Slack post. Easy. You'll get visibility. Word, Google Doc, comments directly in files, as I said, or jam sessions. A lot of times researchers will do a lot of workshopping as well to keep people engaged. It's really knowing once you have your results, where to share them out. I think that is the most important part in terms of getting that impact. Because a lot of times there's just a lot of great reports, but then people just don't look at it because they're not in that certain area. Um, but yeah, that's my soapbox rant. So that is the main discussion for this final section here. Definitely want to pause to see if there's any questions. And I think we're actually worked on time because we're now at the main hour portion. So glad that worked out.
Yeah, that was amazing. You finished such a wide range of information delivery in like with 2 minutes remaining. So props to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad. But yeah, this is the extra, I guess this would be the extra Q&A. So if people do have questions, like I am an open book and I am more than happy to address as many as I can comprehend. I am not a genie, so I may not have the best answer, but I'm happy to give it a shot.
Yeah, I see Radhika raise her hand. Do you want to unshare so we can just see you and focus on the
Yes.
Yeah. Am I audible and visible?
let me
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Hi, Sam. Thank you for that answer. It really, really helped to
Oh.
understand things in layers. I have a question like, how do you document your process? Like in two ways,
Ooh.
one for
Mhm.
yourself and also for the process that you are engaging, because zooming in and zooming out is something you probably have to do frequently. And at times, if you don't, you lose on insights and important
Yes.
pivotal information. So how do you like, do you write it or how do you
Mhm.
manage it?
No, it's a good question. It's so funny you asked that because I am currently on an initiative right now for the research team I work with right now is a size of 30, and we're doing a whole process on like how do we document research, which is the whole initiative across all these different teammates. So it's very timely. Um, I would say that if it's from like a personal level, you really want to make sure that you have your favorite like go-to note-taking tool. At my previous org, I was a very strong Notion girly. I loved having all of my projects like aligned where it's like, here's the status, like a Kanban board, and then showcase like if you click into it, here are like the stages in which I need to get these projects done. That keeps it very clean and easy. I don't have access to Notion right now because the new company I'm in doesn't use Notion. However, I try to still make it work. Like we use OneNote, so that's like Microsoft, where basically for every meeting that I'm in, I will create a folder that will have like, here's the meeting notes for this topic, right? And here we'll go through that. And then the next time I have another sync, I know, okay, looking back at those meetings, like this is what we have to get done. I've checked these off. I may not have checked these off, but I know going into the next sync, like this is what we need to do. So it's definitely like I would say it's about having the to-do list, but then it's also about having like a way to easily organize the different to-do lists by project are usually the things that I'm kind of focused on. I don't know if that answers the question, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely insightful.
Okay.
My curiosity was more about the format, like what information you
Mm.
jot down and how you use it further, like the contents of the note taking.
Oh,
Sometimes
like the
I have
form.
realized that
Mhm.
I write my note, but then later on, at times I miss out on some of the information. I don't realize that I need to write it down right now. If not, it's
Yes.
going to kind of mess up the story. So,
Yes.
um, that's
That's a
how.
good question. Yeah, I think it's something where it's like, and I'm not the best note taker. I will confess to that. It's usually one of two things. If I'm doing note taking, if it's possible, I do like to have like we do a lot in Teams, so we'll have like Copilot do like the note transcription, so it will record things for me. But for me in particular, like if I'm the person that's going through and I'm like taking notes while I'm talking, I try to at least like kind of I will high level try to write down like, okay, this is the most important phrase from what I just heard in like a really short, like truncated form. But then after the meeting is done, I will go back through my notes and kind of flesh it out more. So I wouldn't say that my note taking has like a very clean style. What right when I'm finished at the meeting, it usually requires me to like go back and kind of adjust the grammar mistakes or the spelling mistakes, but I'm usually trying to type out as much as I can and then go back and reformat it.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
that's what I was. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. No problem. I wish if there was a I wish there was like a better, I don't know, way of doing the trans yeah, I don't know if you have a different take on those notes, but that's kind of how I've been doing it.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I have been experimenting a lot with refining my note-taking habits, like to-do list. At the end, like
Yeah.
there are so many things, then things get lost in between. So I'm trying, but the method you right now described is
Yeah.
really, I think, helpful. You write one
Yeah.
keyword and then go back to it and write more,
And fill it.
add more details.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like that's been, at least for me, it's like, especially if you can do it in a relatively short time after that session, you can usually fill in, like, oh, I remember from this word, like, this is what the conversation was. And then I fill it out.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have some additional questions here. Joe, are you still here? Just trying to find his question. Um, he was asking, do you ever get product owners wanting you to include a particular demographic in your research because of a market opportunity? For example,
Mm.
there are few older users of the product and the owner believes there's value for older users.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that does happen. I don't think it happens to me as commonly, but when it does happen, I think it's a bit of a, this is where we start getting into the lines of like what's performative research versus not performative research. I may, if I feel like it's a conversation that the recruitment does not make sense for, I will try to fight back on that. I will have that conversation piece. If it's something that I feel like this is not going to make or break, it's not going to really impact the research quality of what I'm doing right now, then I'll add it in. So it is a bit more of a case by case basis that I go through. But yeah, it's really dependent on like, do I know that stakeholder well enough to be able to fight for that case type of thing?
Cool. I see a question from Amy. Amy, would you like to unmute?
Yes, hi Sam. I just want to ask one question. You mentioned that you did the research through the panel to get the first-hand data. So will you
Mhm.
also get some second-hand data from other second-hand resources?
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a great question. I do feel like when it's like you get the secondhand data, I would say like both before and after. So you get it beforehand with that lit review that I was talking about, with making sure that you can basically kind of triangulate the data and be like, past studies have said this or have said that. You can also do it in the reverse end though. You can also do the study that you're looking at right now, and then afterwards, what I tend to do is I'll go to coworkers that are kind of working in that same space and be like, hey, does this match up with what you're seeing? Or like, hey, have you done a study that also ties into these particular cases? And that helps with that triangulation piece, as opposed to me doing it completely in a silo. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raymond, am I saying your name right?
Uh, yes, you are Raymond D.
Mhm.
Hi. I was wondering if you get frustrated because you're doing your work so fast that sometimes you might not do it properly the way you would like to.
Yes, that's a good question. You can definitely get fatigued if you're kind of going at a mile a minute. I'm very blunt, probably to a fault. I will say what's on my mind. But yeah, it is definitely possible. I think with research in particular, I find that I like to have a balance. Like I like to have some periods that might be like really rapid and really fast paced. And then after doing that, if it's like definitely if it's like a couple months of doing it, I'll be like, hey, to my manager, like, can I get staffed on a project that's a bit longer term, might be more foundational? We're doing a deeper dive. So I generally like to mix it up when I can. I will move fast when I need to, but I try to only move fast in like a burst of a couple of months rather than moving fast. I think if you move fast for
Mm,
like 12 plus months, that's when you really start to be like, oh, it's a lot going on.
yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Good question.
Mhm.
All right. So,
So I have actually another question. I was
oh,
wondering if you're a beginner in the field or you need a
Oh,
placement. So how would you proceed?
yeah. If you're someone that's kind of brand new in the field, I think I mean, there's so many different ways that people will probably recommend, right? And this is again the like, I'm not a genie. I wish I had all the answers. But the things that I kind of focus on a lot is like, again, if it's the volunteering to like get the experience that the jobs require to have for an entry level job, which should not be the case at all, but that's how it happens. The other thing that I also talk about too is that for me in particular, I didn't start out in UXR. Like I actually started out looking for a company that I could grow in. And my first job, I actually was a customer support agent. So not it's similar enough, but definitely not in the UX space whatsoever. But I was looking on LinkedIn and found pretty much like a startup where I could see like, oh, there's peoples that are starting out in support and then they're transitioning to like data analytics or product management. And then I was like, okay, perfect. This is the place that I know I've seen other people moving across. And then I'm also checking too to see, do they have a research team? And sure enough, if I stalk them on LinkedIn, there are a couple of people that are also researchers there. So I kind of came in with a very clear objective of like, if I can't compete against like hundreds and hundreds of applicants, can I at least get a foot in the door and then grow internally in the company and network that way, which is the way that I basically got into doing research was just from internal networking, shadowing that team, showing a lot of interest. And then they were like, hey, we'll open up an internal position just for you. And I didn't have to apply against like hundreds of
Mm.
people. So it's
Mm.
a not saying it's always going to be the option, but it's definitely another way of going about it that I don't see talked about as much.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks for the tip.
Yeah,
Thank
no
Mhm.
problem.
Hi,
That's
a
a
quick
great story.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, a quick question on that. You mentioned before that you recommend maybe doing some volunteer work. Is there a
Mm.
place that you recommend us to go or companies that you know that accept, that kind of volunteer work?
There is actually oh man, I hope I can find it in this short period of time. But one of my mentees, she uses this organization to go and find volunteer work. As we're speaking, I'm trying to pull up the chat right now because I asked her about it very recently. Let me see. Do, do,
If you
do.
can't find it, I
Mhm.
will let me know later and I will post it with the recording.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it might. Let me just scroll just a little bit to see if it comes through. Do, do, do. Mm. Okay, here, actually, I got it. Wow, I got very lucky with that. And then send. These are two different organizations that I've had mentees talk about that they use to get volunteer work to help them with building out their portfolios. I haven't personally used them, so I can't say that I'm recommending like because of past experience, but mentees that I work with have been able to like use them for like portfolios to help them with landing jobs. So something I wanted to put out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome research. I know that some of my mentees also have these challenges of maybe they're still studying or they don't have portfolio pieces. So these could be a great solution for that.
Yes. I will also say with regards to if you're studying, this was in a totally different talk that I had, but one thing I do recommend is that if it's an academic case study that you have, right? Where you're like, I did this, but it's only in academia. Think about the ways of like kind of making sure that you're articulating it in an interview sense that will match more for corporations. So, for example, when I was in undergrad or when I was doing my master's degree, I had a study on like Goodreads. Now, Goodreads did not hire me. It was literally just like a self-study that we had to do for class. But I made sure to do things like creating a pre-test and a post-test. Like I try to find what's their average CSAT score right now, which is like a measurement for satisfaction. Found that on the web and was like, can we find a way to like increase that score through the iterations of designs that we did, which we were able to do so. So I could actually showcase the value as if I was working at Goodreads. Now, obviously, I leave the disclaimer that like this is not a Goodreads like didn't hire me, but it's showcasing that impact if it was to be actually used by them and the recommendation. So there's ways to go about even turning like academic work into something that could be useful for an interview. Um, that was my soapbox for that piece.
Yeah, and I personally also think that a lot of opportunities are come through because of networking. So
Yes.
knowing how to network correctly, not please don't send cold LinkedIn connections to people. That's not going to help you. People are not invested in other people who add them randomly and ask for jobs. That's not the way to do it. But learning how to do networking correctly, unfortunately, is not something that people talk about either.
Mhm.
So that's something that could help if you know how to reach out to people. And like joining a community of other UXers who are working and getting to know them, which is again why my soapbox of why IXDF is awesome because you get to interact with other peers, and they are there to be able to learn from each other. So you have a willing audience to engage with, and that can be very helpful as well.
Totally. Yeah. Which, by the way, if you do want to network with me, I will drop in the LinkedIn chat. I swear I am not, again, a person that bites at all whatsoever. You could just say that you came from this chat, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, cool. Definitely feel free to sync up. Um,
I
I like
actually
getting stuff
already
there.
dropped your LinkedIn profile in
Oh,
the
did
chat
you? Oh,
earlier.
okay, perfect. Okay. You beat me to it. You already beat me to it. Okay, cool.
Did that answer your question, Gemma?
Yeah, that was super helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So who's next? All right.
I would just say I'm approaching this from like product management, so it's kind of
Mhm.
elucidating as far as like how to interact with my teams to better be able to communicate like user needs. But I'm
Yes.
coming from a startup as well, similar to your
Mm.
background, actually, Sam,
Yep.
where I've started at a certain role and growing within. Now I know the product intimately, and I'm building and reiterating
Yes.
on that. So I'm kind of great for that position.
Mhm.
So it's important to understand, I think, definitely how to conduct the research since you're kind of, a jack of all trades here. So as far as like question, I don't really have it, but just kind of like
Yeah.
echoes a lot, and I appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming to the session. That is a
Yeah,
very UXR specific, but
yeah,
that I mean this is great because this is what I was hoping it would be still broad enough that would be applicable to people that are not just doing UXR full time. But yeah, it's definitely I would say it's like it's same way in which I have to learn the language of like how do product managers work and how do designers work to be able to give the information that is most relevant to you guys. It's also super helpful as researchers to have people that are like, hey, I thought of this question and I was actually thinking, here's like some ideas maybe that we could start with, right? Like having the starting point as opposed to most 9 out of 10 times when you're doing research, it's kind of like they're like, hey, figure it out, enjoy, good luck. But having more of a collaborative model of people giving feedback on like, hey, this is like what I'm thinking for this research plan. What are your thoughts? And knowing that you guys also have like that greater viewpoint of what is the business needs is super helpful. So you're if you get researchers at your startup or already have them, they will be very happy. Trust me,
yeah,
with you being aware of these types of concepts.
yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
I had a thought or a question. I was wondering, do you ever, like, before the test starts or before any kind of research starts, do you ask stakeholders what are their assumptions? Like, what do you
Mm,
think will happen in this test? Like, get them out,
yep.
um, so that, I'm aware of what is it that they think is gonna be the result. So it's not like a shock to, or it's not so
Yes.
like separated from what they think they're going for versus what actually is gonna happen. Sometimes that's a good.
Yeah. It is. I think so. I mean, I think it works for both ends, right? It's nice when the research reaffirms. It also has a lot of shock value when the research totally shows that it's quite different, right, from what we were anticipating. I think it is good practice to kind of ask them, like, well, what do you think might happen out of this stuff? I will say, I don't know if it's because I've been doing research for so long, but I feel like sometimes I just get the vibe of like what they're thinking while I'm talking to them. Like they may not say it like out loud, but they're like, "Oh yeah, like we really want research, like people to really like this feature." And I'm like, "Okay, got it. You think that they're gonna really like this feature?
Yeah.
Okay, understood." So I don't ask it all the time. I actually kind of ask it more so in cases where they seem kind of neutral and I'm not getting a vibe of like what they might be leaning towards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of a fun exercise to
Yeah.
understand how invested they are in a particular
Yes.
thing. And honestly, most good designers, project managers, they're like, well, we think that this is going to happen, but that's why we're testing
Yeah.
to see what will happen. So that's good. Um, how do I say this name? Scher-Shah, is it? Would you like to come on and talk to Sam? It's the question is, since AI is changing the job market, how should me as intern should prepare for current and future in term of upskill?
Ah, this is such a good question. Oh my gosh. Okay.
The answer to this question is very long.
Yeah, the answer to this question is like how much time you got. That's like a whole separate section in of itself. Um, I do think I've had plenty of conversations with at my org. I will say that I am ironically, while I'm senior, I'm probably the most junior senior person that's there. I have talked with a lot of people that have been doing this for like over a decade, that are seeing all these changes happen right now. And when I chat with them, oftentimes it's like we're having these conversations of like, well, if you were to restart from scratch, like what would you try to learn right now? I still think that the fundamentals of research is necessary. I think a lot of people will assume like, well, if AI is going to do all the research, then like what are we doing here, right, in the first place? Which is a great question. But the thing that I think is really what makes someone a great researcher is being able to answer those hard-hitting questions on the spot, which ChatGPT is not going to be able to do. It's being able to understand all the context that you're given and be able to interpret, okay, based off of the context, this is the method that's going to work best here. Or based off of how I know stakeholders are engaging with me, this is the best way to share out these insights. The ChatGPT can tell you like, oh, like we see people doing like PowerPoint slides, right? But does it know for this particular instance that this is the best case to do? Probably not. So I think it's a lot of thinking around like how do I, or if I'm doing a method, right? How do I explain why I want this method for this particular moment? Not just like oh, like surveys are great because they're doing, it's like you can get a large sample. It's like, okay, but why does that matter, right? If I can articulate why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, it definitely makes you a much more valuable researcher. So long-winded way of answering, I think the fundamentals are still the things that I would have personally started out with. Um, as I said, AI prompting is definitely something that I think a lot more people are going to be using. So, but you don't have to know a very particular tool because tools are always changing. What we use as ChatGPT right now, 10 years from now, might be a totally different company that we use. We don't know. We really don't know. So it's better to just know how to do prompting overall as opposed to making it really tool specific. So that's kind of my take on it. My hot take on AI right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you. Um,
I have a
okay.
question.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
I'm just observing from listening to your story that you have a lot of social skills when it comes to babysitting the panel, babysitting the stakeholders, like staying in touch with everyone. It's a lot of
Yes,
social skills there that makes you valuable because people find you easy to connect with
I
and
try
approach.
at least. I definitely try.
Yeah. Well
Well, I
done.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I would say the the higher you get in research, I say like junior level, mid-level, you're more so focused on honing your craft, right? Honing your methods, knowing when to use things. However, like when you start getting into like senior and above, it's 80% of the job all of a sudden becomes how do you influence people? Like, I kid you not. I think I do research probably actually 20% of my job, but then 80% is in meetings and also like trying to make sure I get people on board with where we need to go or what type of impact we need based off of these findings. So, a lot of the job, at least from my perspective, has always been like socializing and trying to make sure that I'm really articulating why we're doing certain things. Which it's great. I'm also an introvert, so it's definitely quite a different experience. There's definitely a lot of times after work where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just lay down and read a book and call it a day. So if you are someone that's super introverted, I will say this is a field that will get you out of your comfort zone quite a bit. In a good way, in a good way. It definitely has a lot of growth.
One, I think introverts are great at building real relationships. I think introverts can really, spend time to get to know people, and I think that really is the right way to build relationships.
Yes, yes.
I remember I had somebody who was a little bit more senior in just ranking in the organization, and they said to me, "Well, get to know that person and find out what they like to eat, so that you can, give them a reward if they do something for you." And I found that to be so hollow because I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to treat them as a puppy. Um,
Yeah.
if I'm going to get to know them, I'm going to get to know them. I don't think that, and they could just do me a favor because I am a fellow colleague that's looking for help. But this surface level connection of like, tell me what you like to drink, and here is a Pepsi. Like, what? I mean, the fact that they think they can, people can see through that, that's
Yeah.
really sad. But I think introverts have this innate ability to create genuine relationships, and I would put an introvert in charge of creating relationships and educating people, because I would be very confident that they would do it in a very, thoughtful way.
Yeah. It's a lot of active listening too. That's really people love to talk. So if you could like, tone it down and let people chat, it definitely helps with that influencing piece too.
Wow, this was amazing.
Yeah.
Almost don't want it to end.
Are
I have
there
one
any
question,
yeah.
if I may. Yeah. So since like Raymonde also complimented, and that's like coming across fully that you know how to socialize. On that point, one good
Mm.
advice that you received and one bad advice that you received that you think should be different.
Oh wait, say that last part again. I feel like I didn't hear it properly.
For socializing, one good
Yeah.
advice that you received and one bad
Oh.
advice that you think should be different.
Oh, okay. Interesting. One good advice and one bad advice. Good advice, I feel like when it comes to just socializing in general, it's really about, I say this a lot, but it's surprising how many people don't usually do it. It's about meeting people where they're at, right? So it's like acknowledging, like, for a second, like, hey, this person might have a totally different viewpoint than how I am looking at things right now, and letting them have the floor to speak about these things, as opposed to coming into conversations and being like, here's what I think. um, has had a great impact on my work and being able to win people over by understanding first, like what angle are they coming at? What are the things that they care the most about? That is definitely something that I think with the persuasion piece, especially, like is really helpful. Um, in terms of like a bad piece of advice when it comes to socializing, I mean, I feel like it's more of the, again, these are probably cheesy, but the classic of like, oh, you should talk in this certain way to stakeholders. Oh, you should have like, this type of personality type of thing. I'm very in my classic day-to-day work right now, I'm very much like this. I'm very blunt about my feelings. I'm very sensitive as a person. There are just certain things that I will say very randomly in a meeting where people are probably like, "What is Sam talking about? Like this makes no like she's just like being a goofball." But those elements help me with getting deeper rapport with the people that I'm working with and coming at it from the lens of like, I'm not trying to just do research, but I want to make sure that the people I do research with, whether they're like people that are stakeholders or researchers, are also having a good time. Because at the end of the day, we're here for 40 hours a week. So we might as well have a good time together and have a bit of fun. So I think bringing in more of that type of element is super helpful. As opposed to me trying to be like, well, I have to act like professional in a very like specific type of way, because that's just not going to be who I am. And then I'm going to be even more exhausted by the time work ends.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
true. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad. Okay. I
We're
thought
at
I saw there was
time.
one more. Oh, is there one more question though? I thought there was one
Uh,
on
I don't see it.
from
Um,
from Dia on AI prompting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about AI prompting, and I know you mentioned it a couple of times. What
Yes.
would what would you recommend? Where do I go? How do I improve that?
That is a good question. And that is something that I am still learning as we speak with full transparency. There is a course that my company has been sponsoring. I think it's through Chegg that's like on AI prompting in particular. I literally just started it, so I can't be like, oh, this is really good, because that would be a lie if I haven't like really dug deep into it. So if I find resources, I'm always more than happy to like share them out. I know it's a topic that's very high on people's radars right now, but it's also at the same time too, it's so new that for me, a lot of the learning I've done has been more so through trial and error and understanding, like, okay, based off of these types of prompts, this isn't really working. So I will like make a note of it in the future and have like certain prompts saved to be like, this works great, this doesn't work great. And ask coworkers too, what have you guys been using? So it's a lot more like trial and error for me, but I'm sure there's probably like a course out there that does it really well. Um, so I apologize, that's not like a great answer, but that's definitely like the most honest answer I can provide.
No worries.
I
But you,
saw.
you said you just mentioned, did you mention a course in the beginning just before you?
Yeah, there is like some, I think it's through Chegg, if I recall, that's like on AI prompting, or like AI prompt engineering. Let's
Oh,
see.
Brandon pasted that link in the chat. Uh,
Perfect. Yes.
I am so sorry. Please continue this conversation with Sam. I have a prior arrangement engagement that I have to get to, and I got to get driving. So I
No
feel like
worries.
Sam, you're so easy to talk to, and there's so much that we all can learn from you. Please reach out to her and
Yes.
chat and continue the conversation. I will be posting this recording on YouTube, and I will send out the email when I post it. So you will have an opportunity to rewatch. And if you have any questions, ask me.